up, Jared? Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Kyle, you're tough to see. You're outside, huh?
Yeah, sitting near the window. Let me turn it the other way.
Oh, there you go.
There's a,
That's better. That's much better.
okay,
Thanks for getting back to me. I was willing to try 72 this week.
yeah, that's cool. So you're gonna do it into Wednesday?
Yeah, I've been doing 248. I go from the Sunday to Tuesday, and then I just do an OMAG on Wednesday, and then Wednesday to Friday, and then I just have then do just a regular OMAG on Saturday, and Sunday I'll have two.
Cool.
Maybe like my cheat day.
Yeah.
I still watch, but because when I do notice, like when you did mention that one time when you do for a long period of time, sometimes your stomach does rumble when you want to make sure you're close to somewhere. Right. But it's been getting better. At first, earlier it was a little tougher, so it does seem that things are getting. Plus, I'm not as be gross about it, but I'm not as loose as I was before.
Yeah.
Before I was loose as a goose, man. I was like, don't trust this part. Go right to the bathroom. now I'm like, yeah, it's okay. I'm good.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, no, I've been. People are starting to notice, and like you mentioned before, 101. I don't unless they're willing to just find out more about it. I just tell them about where they could get the information or see for you, because they should be reaching out to you, and I just show them the Panda diet book and just tell them what I've been doing.
Cool, man.
They have some questions, but I tell them, hey, listen, the results, 9 weeks, 45 pounds. I was like, I can't really, I just can't not say. I just say everything good about it. It's like, come on, I've done it, I tried it, and you can't not at least understand it. As far as my physical, so I'll see with the doctor and everything else, but I do want to see what my T level is and whatever I have to do. If it's low, I will. And if it's in the 350s, under threes like it was last time, I'm definitely want to bring that puppy up.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're gonna get started. All right, so let me share my screen with you guys. We'll keep questions for the end, as usual. All right, so tonight we got a review of some stuff. You've been exposed to most of the stuff besides the liver information. We'll go through it tonight. I'll get you set up. We're going to be doing that upcoming, the liver cleanse. But to review, right, so I just did a walk with a client in Hillsboro, and I was explaining to her about the Panda. She's not doing the Panda, but the importance of understanding the mind map stuff with that, because that is really, when you understand how the brain forms habits and what's going on with your mind when you're having different thoughts and you're having patterns that you're recognizing, the self-awareness, that is a key element to being able to form a habit around this or anything else, is the mind map stuff. You have to understand that stuff, and that's how you connect those dots. So to review some of the state changers, the reason these are important is when you get in a funk, when you get stressed, that is always going to be what knocks you off track. Okay, it's always going to be some type of stress that knocks you off track. So you got to be able to manage that and manage your mindset, okay, the brain set, to get back to where you need to be. So Hebb's law, remember, that's what gets fired together, gets wired together. Music can change your state instantly. Putting on some good music, putting on your favorite song, making a playlist of your life, that's very powerful. That's something that you can use as a tool. These are all tools that you want to have ready to go. Movement is a huge one. You could be having a bad day, bad week. Just get out and move. There's certain growth factors and hormones that can only get to your brain through physical movement. Very important to move. It doesn't take a long time. Doesn't have to be a full-on workout. Just move. that same center in your brain, the parietal lobe it's called, where emotions come up, that could be an issue if they're negative emotions, is the same center that physical movement taps into. So the physical movement will also rob that part of your brain of the energy to produce these emotions and to let those emotions kind of snowball. Being the bumblebee, where are you putting your attention? All right. Usually when we have issues going on, overwhelm, anxiety, these types of things, fear, it's because we're too focused on ourselves, right? We're too much in our head. So you shift the focus and the attention to somebody else. So that's being the bumblebee. Reach out to somebody else, takes 5 seconds, shoot somebody a message, write them a letter, give them a phone call. When you put the attention on them, it'll change your state, right? It'll change your state because now you're no longer focused on yourself, you're focused on them. The attention thing cannot be overstated. Whenever you're struggling with something, or maybe not even struggling, but you're not feeling like you're progressing towards a goal, just ask yourself, where's your attention been? Right, where your attention goes, the energy's going to flow, and that's the results that are going to follow. And that's where the saying, the grass is always greener, comes from. The grass is always greener. If you're focused on the other part of the grass, that's where you're putting your attention. Think of like that's where you're watering the grass. It's going to be greener because that's where your attention is. Oh, I wish I had that, or I wish, I didn't have this. The grass is always greener because that's where the attention goes. And then journaling and writing slows down the brain. Those emotional centers more in the mammal part of your brain and whatnot. When you bring the human back online and you start writing, especially if you write cursive and you slow down the thoughts, you put them on paper, everything becomes more clear. So journaling and writing is a great way. And I did that last week about, I felt some fear creeping into my brain. So I journaled about it one morning and boom, gone, right back on track. So you take the 10 minutes and you write and you get clear on stuff. So these are state changers. Remember, these should all be in your toolbox. I want you to be mindful of environment number one. Environment number one is in your brain. Okay. The inner dialogue is critical. And that goes down to what I was saying with your attention. If you just you got to think of like when you're learning the mind map stuff, you have to be the observer sometimes. You almost have to have the ability to step back and just kind of observe life. Like think like you're taking a break from being a fully on active participant to an observer. So you want to observe and say, what's going on in my head? What are what am I saying to myself? Because the inner dialogue is going to drive your actions. So be mindful what's going on up here. Don't put yourself in a corner where you have no options when you have no freedom. Like Devin today goes to me, she goes, I'm not going to eat today. And I said, you going to do a 48? She goes, no, I'm not going to eat today. So we'll see how long it lasts tomorrow. So that was, and that's really smart because it's okay. You give yourself that freedom, that flexibility. You could use this in any part of your life. Be mindful of if you're using controlling words too much with your inner dialogue. I have to do this. I have to do this. I must do this. I need to do this. I should do this. These are all things you don't really want to do when that's the verbiage that's going on in your brain. That gives you a clue. How do you go about doing things differently? Or why do you have so many things that you're in your life that you don't really enjoy doing? Right. So these controlling words and the showing up words, I don't cover too much with you guys, but this would be a good journaling exercise is who do you want to be in life? Like, who do you want to show up as? So you think of all like the qualities that you might admire in other people. And I'll tell you, one of my showing up words is strength. So what that means is when I'm with my family, I want to provide a security blanket. If I want them to feel safe around me, I want to be able to physically, be strong because they're going to pick up on that. Right. I want to bring wisdom to every situation. Right. So to me, I came up with the definition of that as clarity and truth. I want to be able to provide that to people no matter the setting. Right. And then love. So those are my 3 showing up words. But if you take time to think about this stuff And then you could be much more aware of, man, I'm being an asshole. I'm not doing any of these three things. Right? It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect with them, but thinking about the showing upwards. How do you want to show up at work, with your family, all this stuff? Just start being mindful of this stuff. That would be a good journaling thing. What words do you want to show up with? What qualities do you want to show up with? As much as you can. Okay, after this, we're going to get into the fasting stuff. I went over this slide in another one. Good questions you can ask yourself. Is the approach you're making things more simple or more complex? Always go towards the simpler route, right? When you're trying to solve something or form a new habit, go to the simpler route. What's the brain really trying to tell you? So the girl who I just went to walk with tonight, in between sessions, she knows what to eat. She had lost previously, which was 60 pounds. She's up like 8 pounds since COVID. Nothing extreme, but in her brain, she's starting to panic a little bit. But the brain is trying to tell her, hey, there's too much stress. There's too much something going on. It's not an information problem, right? Well, she was like, well, what should I be eating? What about that? And I said, that's not the issue at all, right? So you got to make that clear. And then eventually you develop that. Okay, what's actually going on? What's it telling me? What's the brain telling me? What do you think is the best way to proceed? Because you have to be the one making the choice. That's freedom, right? So when we do the mind maps, as I was telling you, I'll present you based on what you say with some possible solutions based on my point of view. You might say none of those work. That's fine. Then we'll come up with some more stuff. But let's say there's two options. I'll always be like, okay, which one kind of resonates more with you? Which one is more doable? So you'll see too, at the end of the Panda, when I meet with you all one-on-one, when we kind of finalize what plan are you going to move forward with, it's got to be your input. It's got to be your choice. It can't be me saying, okay, this is what you're doing for the rest of your life, right? You got to own this stuff. What's getting in the way of you reaching your outcome, right? That kind of goes along with number two. What's the brain really trying to tell you? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Just progress. Progress, not perfection. Don't beat yourself up if you fall off track. Just start again. That's all you got to do. And when threat or stress is present, you got to give yourself a choice, or the illusion of a choice, right? You got to give yourself, I think I was telling you, so maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't know if that was last week, a mind map I was doing with a client where she feels like she's stuck in this job, like there's no end in sight. So it's okay, let's just give yourself a deadline of when you're going to have at least a resume out there for another job, or a deadline of when I know I'm going to be away from, like I'm 6 months, I will not be working at this job. Now all of a sudden you have options, right? So you lower the level of threat, even though the external circumstance hasn't changed, you change the way that you're looking at it. So that's some mind map stuff for you. Biofeedback. Now this is the stuff that is really important as your body's changing. Digestion. We want that to be excellent, right? It might be a work in progress, but ultimately, like let's say, I could tell you with a lot of my buddies, if they tell me like they're constipated or having all these stomach issues, that their health it's been, and that kind of will manifest over time, but their health is not good, right? Digestion is so key. 80% of your immune system is located there. Majority of your neurotransmitters, that's why it's called the second brain, or the gut feeling, is located in your stomach. So you want digestion to be on point. Reproductive system. Okay. So that's things, for most people in this group, could be things like sex drive, libido, could be for the women, menstrual cycle, stuff like that. Sweating is a good thing. We want to note any changes in that. Hunger and appetite. Now remember, those two things are different. They're not the same thing. Appetite is your ability, your capacity to store volume of food, right? Appetite might go up and down, and people say, how much should I eat? Well, that might change week by week. Let your appetite dictate how much you're going to eat. Where most people say, I got to eat this many calories. That's the outside in approach, right? So the inside out is eat to your appetite. eat to your appetite. Hunger can be very variable based on stress levels and sleep. So hunger can be all over the place. And hunger is usually what trips people up. But I think I was last week, I wrote an article about that, where that's really, hunger is a hormone. Once you reframe that in your brain, that hunger is just a hormone, that's all it is, right? You can manage it much better. Most people panic as soon as they get the mild, hunger feeling, and they feel like they got to eat. And hunger, if you're not sleeping, is going to be much more difficult to manage if you're not sleeping adequately. Mood and attitude, those are kind of great markers as far as what you're doing, if you're enjoying it, how's your mindset. If you're snapping at everybody, like everybody can think of a diet they've done in the past that one or 2 weeks in, they're miserable. They're snapping at everybody. They're losing weight, so they kind of stick it out for a little bit. We don't want that, right? We want the mood and attitude to be good. Sleep, again, that sleep is the king. I think in the 4th or 5th lesson, I go over sleep in a lot more detail, but if you're kind of not paying attention to sleep, you're missing really the key foundation for health. Okay, sleep and energy. Energy kind of encompasses all this stuff, and if your energy is improving, or it's already great, the other stuff I could tell you is probably on point. Energy is the number one asset you have. It's the number one biofeedback thing. You can't have great energy if you're not sleeping well, right? Like all this stuff ties into energy. So hunger is a hormone. So read what that says: biological signals that are sent based upon thoughts, environment, and entrainment patterns in sleep. Okay, so these things, your thoughts can drive hunger. You watch you're doing a 48-hour fast right now. You go watch a commercial for Burger King or something. Guess what's going to happen? You might release some ghrelin, which is your main hunger hormone, right? The environment. Like if I go out there in the kitchen and Devin's making brownies and all this stuff, and I step into that kitchen environment, same thing. There's going to be some hunger signals. Entrainment patterns. This is the big one because this one could take a while to break. That's basically over the years when you've roughly the time periods when you've trained your body to expect food. When those times come, like for most people, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? You're going to get hungry. It's mild. It should go away fairly quickly. The longer you do this, the less and less and less you're going to feel those. Now, what you will notice, maybe you notice this after your cheat day, but I tell you this because right, summer's coming up. Maybe you're going on vacation and you're going to downshift and maybe you just won't fast at all that week or weeks. Maybe you'll go to like a 16-8. So I'll go to like a 16-8 on vacation because I want to have lunch. I enjoy that on vacation and dinner. But when I come back, the first few days, guess what happens around lunchtime? I get a little more hungry than usual, but it doesn't last long. So those entrainment patterns, and that's why when people say, "What time should I eat?" I just say, just try to keep it consistent when you're in a fasting focused lifestyle. Try to keep it consistent. If you're doing lunch one day, yeah, you could do that here and there, but lunch, dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're gonna have a tougher time with that. So keep an eye on that. And with even modest sleep production, ghrelin's gonna go up. Okay, that's your main hunger hormone. Leptin's gonna go down. Leptin's another hunger hormone. Leptin is stored in your fat cells. So typically what happens as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, leptin levels drop. That's also going to signal you to become more hungry. That's another reason traditional diets aren't going to work, if you have that initial weight loss. But sleep is going to greatly affect those. So these three guys here, I'll kind of just give you a little background so you know a little bit more of people that help mold my philosophy when it comes to, just let's say talking about nutrition. So Charles Poliquin, who I've mentioned before, suddenly passed away a few years ago, but I was fortunate to learn from him in person 3 or 4 times in very intimate, small settings. The guy was a genius. All three of these guys are very, very brilliant. But Charles really taught me a lot about hormones, right? So if we look at insulin is the one hormone that you can really control. Lucky for us, it's considered a master hormone. Right, so you have insulin, estrogen, and cortisol, like your 3 master hormones. Insulin is arguably the one that like the book I have sitting over there is Why We Get Sick. The whole book is about insulin resistance. Insulin is tied into every known disease to mankind, but we can control insulin, right? So Charles had taught me something called, and maybe some of you had done this with me way back, but it was biosignature, right? So we used the calipers, and what he did over the years was so brilliant. Working with all these doctors, he figured out which skin folds corresponded with what hormones and blood markers. So we'd be able to tell, okay, if this is off, okay, this is an issue with stress. This is an issue with growth hormone. This is an issue with cortisol. So really outside the box thinker. I learned a lot from him about things like magnesium and D3. So, that's part of my background with it. This guy right here, Scott Abel, the one on the bottom. I knew when I came across him that I had to hire him, and I know Polly knows him. I think Polly's done some work with him. But so back in college, so early 2000s, when I was going through my junior year, senior year, and I started really figuring out what can the body handle in a day's worth of eating and not have any negative repercussions as far as changing the body compositions, like cheat days and stuff like that. Again, there was no science out there on any of this stuff at that time. And I brought all this stuff that I'd come up with and that I experimented with, because I always base stuff on, you can have the science, I try to back it with the science, but then what is the real world application? So you got to I always experiment with everything. And at that time, I would just experiment on myself. But I brought him all this stuff. He had no clue what I was talking about as far as trying to keep the body from shutting down with these massive spikes in food. A couple of years later, came across Scott Abel, and he had come up with a presentation talking about exactly that. So I learned a ton of stuff with nutrition from Scott, and the biofeedback stuff I was taught. Scott taught me that. We would always go over, what's the biofeedback telling you? What's the biofeedback telling you? And one of the main things with him is the body has a tremendous ability to eat if you have it in the right metabolic profile without any negative repercussions. People say, well, I'm going to get fat if I have a cheat meal or a cheat. No, you won't. The body can handle a tremendous amount of food. That metabolism can upregulate or downregulate 40%. Most people never experiment with that upper 40%. They'll just keep cutting their calories, and guess what? Metabolism is going to keep coming down. So I learned a lot from Scott, and then John Meadows, he coached me for a few years as well. Really, he had a rare gastrointestinal disease, which caused him to really examine the micronutrients in foods, right? Micros. So I'm not worried about the macros, okay, carbs, protein, fat. Worried more about the micro stuff. So I learned a ton of stuff from John about that. Super nice guy. And he was able to come back and compete high level in bodybuilding, despite having most of his intestines removed. So he was, all three of these guys, really, really bright guys. And that's just some of the background. Now, all the stuff I learned from them, when I would apply it to myself, all these elements combined with the mind map are in the Panda, right? There's a reason that you guys have a cheat day, or I believe everybody, or a free day, whatever you want to call it. Most of us don't need that metabolically, but psychologally, right? You got to have that freedom, that flexibility. Bring this up. This is, so if you look at bodybuilding, I have a kid that's competing this weekend. I'm explaining to his mother, the body has this pendulum-like effect, right? If you force it to do this, it's only a matter of time until it comes back to this, right? So bodybuilding, what you'll see, especially like a natural bodybuilding show, some of these guys and these coaches will just have their people cut out water like 2 days out. Well, guess what's going to happen? You might time it right, and you might get lucky, and you might look great, and your skin might look really, really thin. But when you cut out water like that, guess what the body's going to do? It's going to retain water. It's going to start holding on. It's going to release a certain hormone called aldosterone, which I'll talk about later with sleep. Now you're going to retain more water, right? If you increase sodium in the short term, you're going to and you don't have enough sodium in your system, it's going to retain sodium within a matter of time until it normalizes. So the body always kind of, the more crazily you do something, the more it's going to respond the opposite way. Carbohydrates is another example. I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me that they're carb sensitive, which is ridiculous. If you were carb sensitive, you would not be here, because that's the genetics that would have been passed on in your family line, right? And carbohydrates, predominantly what people have eaten throughout history to survive, right? Meat was not plentiful if you were a hunter-gatherer. You might have this big influx of meat, but then you might go weeks again without having animal protein. So carb sensitivity, when people say that, what they've done is they've cut out carbs for a long period of time. They've down-regulated like the enzymes that are needed to break down carbohydrate in their stomach. Now they go back to eating a little bit of carbs. What happens? They might get bloated. They might get gassy. They might get all this stuff. They've set themselves up for that. The body will reverse and be able to handle them again. But it's, oh, I'm carb sensitive. I ate a few carbs and I put on weight and my stomach hurt. The pendulum effect, right? So just something I want you to be mindful of when it comes to the human body. Some ways that I like to look at fasting is, I look at it as a superpower for a few reasons. Very few people that you ever meet in your life will ever even attempt or examine something like this, to do something like this, right? It's not necessarily the most comfortable thing. I get that. I understand it. But if you, and I always looked at it like this when I was starting, because again, it's always about the inner dialogue and reframing. Now, I know, let's say I had a business meeting and it's me and another guy, and we're trying to negotiate something with the gyms, let's say. In my head, I'll be like, I know I'm tougher than this guy because I can go a night without eating, and he's probably never done that in his life. I know that sounds silly, but you start framing this is something that you're doing that's making you kind of, if you want, extraordinary, right? So you look at it like that. And then every time you, for example, do a 48-hour fast, it's a low, mild stress. Okay, it's a low, but it's not a chronic stress. It's a low, mild stress, hormesis it's called, which the body can handle. But every time you go through that, you make the body a little more resilient, right? And the more you can apply that to the body, it is harder for disease to bring you down, right? It's a stress adaptation. So every week we're applying this and getting this nice hit of what's called hormesis. So look at it as like a superpower, what you're doing, right? Even if you never do a longer fast after the Panda, I hope you do. But let's say you never did another 48 again. Now you know that you could do it. You know it's right there. I can't even think who I was talking to the other day. I went for a walk with one of my old mentors, and he was in the hospital for 5 days with COVID. And he said, Kyle, he goes, I didn't want to eat. I just wasn't hungry at all. And he's done fasting with me before and all that. And you'll notice when you get sick, usually you're not hungry. The body wants to fast, right? That's a clue to us. The body needs periods of time to fast because remember, digestion takes up a tremendous amount of energy. So let's say you're sick and you're forcing yourself to eat. Well, that energy, right, you're pulling from the same pool of energy. I'd rather let the immune system do its thing and have all the energy reserves that it wants, right? But so your body will kind of tell you it needs to fast periodically. And remember too, it's not in this slide, but a 72-hour fast resets your immune system. A 72-hour fast will reset your immune system. You don't hear about this in any medical talks, any of this stuff. So that's something to consider. I would urge you to try to do at least one a year, a 72-hour fast, just one more day than you're doing. And I actually think it's easier in some ways than a 48. Okay, bloating and inflammation. With fasting, you're going to greatly reduce these two things. So I have people that'll have really big drops right away. And bloating and inflammation is kind of the same thing, right? Like when you're inflamed, right, and stress hormones are up and all that, you're going to retain more fluids. Inflammation, I think I talked about last week. To me, it's really, from the dictionary, it's not the same thing, but it's really insulin resistance and inflammation are one and the same thing. They go hand in hand. For example, with cholesterol is only an issue in the presence of inflammation. Other than that, cholesterol is great. It's fantastic for us. We need it. Every cell in the body, the brain runs off cholesterol. Every cell in the body needs cholesterol to function, but it's been vilified. We got to look, when it's in the presence of inflammation, that's when it's a problem. So my one buddy, and I have it in the book, Jabba, it's one of my best friends. So he came to me like, this is about 2 years ago now. Yeah, about 2 years ago. And if he's the type, if he comes to me for help, I know that there's something really wrong, because he's just such a ball buster, and but he pulled me aside one night and said, I'm scared. He goes, I feel like I'm going to die. He's a short little guy, but he was heavy. He's always been heavy. So anyhow, he's been on acid reflux, like Nexium type stuff for over 2 decades. And I said, all right, here's what we're going to do if you want me to help you. You're going to start doing the fast. So I told him the 48s, 72s. And remember, pain is a great motivator. So he was scared at this point. So he jumps right in and starts doing it. Within a couple weeks, or let's say a couple months, he's down like 35 pounds. He had his follow-up with his gastroenterologist shortly thereafter, maybe a couple more months after that. He has a yearly endoscopy, and they look at everything. He's got ulcers and all this type of stuff normally. And the doc comes back in after you get the results, and he says, man, your inflammation is pretty much gone. He goes, we can cut your dose like in half. And he said, well, I hate to tell you, doc. He goes, I stopped taking that a couple months ago. So all this stuff just from fasting and drinking the juice will really help, like the baking soda if you have indigestion. But real world example right there, right? That's why I like to base stuff on what actually happens in the real world as far as inflammation being down, the bloat being gone. And I don't think I have it in any of the presentations, but and I may have mentioned it to you guys, but the acid reflux, right, or the GERD that people will get, that is an issue, and you can find this in books too. It's an issue of too little stomach digestive enzyme, too little acid. So I'll repeat that. It's an issue, and I think I go over this maybe in a liver presentation, but it's too little acid. So they'll give you, what they do to solve this really is they'll give you an antacid, like a Nexium or a proton pump inhibitor. So the little acid you have, it's going to suppress that even further. Remember how important your gut is in your health. That is not a road you want to go down. So what happens, right, when people say, why do I get this feeling then? When you don't have the proper digestive enzyme activity, like hydrochloric acid, I think I mentioned to you guys, when you don't have that, the food that you eat ferments. It ferments and the gas builds up. What happens is the sphincter up here in the esophagus opens up, and that food stuff comes back up and it burns. But it's not because you have too much acid. It's too little acid to break the food down, right? And if you read enough obscure books, you'll see that clear as day, but you're not going to see that in any mainstream type stuff. Right? You got to always think, do the powers that be want you to actually be healthy, right? Pharma is a big industry. So you got to think about stuff like this. If everybody was fasting like you guys are doing and sleeping, the economy would collapse, right? Because all that stuff would crumble, medications and whatnot. Okay, we'll talk about hormones. Again, I know I've told you guys this stuff before, but I don't know what's going to connect with you and what you picked up the first time. So when you do a longer fast, you start getting into the 48s really. Maybe one meal a day, you'll definitely get a growth hormone spike, but when you start going beyond a day, growth hormone will go up 2,000 to 3,000% over baseline. 2,000 to 3,000%. Growth hormone, like the reason bodybuilders use growth hormone is not to get bigger. It's because it's profound at its ability to mobilize fat. Right? We talked about how fasting increases blood flow to stubborn fat areas. Growth hormone plays a role in that. So growth hormone is really the hormone of youth. Like guys like Sylvester Stallone, they're real big into using growth hormone. And I haven't been able to verify, but through my readings throughout the years, one of the books I came across, so if you're taking like an injectable growth hormone, the one that your body can produce from the inside, okay, natural growth hormone is 8 times more effective than what's called exogenous, so one that you put in from the outside. So you think about it, and growth hormone's expensive, guys. It's very expensive if you're going to get the medication. But every time you're fasting, you're getting a nice hit of that. The other time you get a real nice hit of growth hormone is if you're sleeping properly. It's produced at night. Has very big effects on your brain. So that's one thing. And that's also very muscle preserving. You combine that when you get more insulin sensitive is now go to my grave sentence. It's actually easier to put on muscle when you're following a fasting program like this. Insulin. I talked about that. That's the only hormone that we can really control is insulin. It's produced when we eat. Now, I had in the Facebook group that we have for fasting, when we were on vacation, like late March, one of the guys he wanted some input because and I was at the time I was saying I was wondering how long it was going to get for like the North American diet mentality to kind of try to infiltrate fasting in more ways than they already have. But he said he came across in another fasting group, somebody was saying, well, every time you smell food, insulin is produced very, very mildly, okay? When you look at food, actually the digestive process begins, and you'll have a very mild increase in insulin. We're talking mild. So you always have to, so the way my brain works, I said, what are you actually fasting from, guys? You're not fasting from insulin. You're fasting from food, right? So don't let somebody get in your brain and say, well, it doesn't matter. You're going to produce insulin anyway if you smell food or this or that. Insulin, you want to be more insulin sensitive. If you're insulin resistant, you are on the road to disease. When you become too insulin resistant, you become type 2 diabetic. So that's under our control. And when insulin is raised, cannot lose fat. Can't lose fat. Insulin signals your body to store. It's the most anabolic hormone in the human body. Cortisol, right? So cortisol, something Poliquin taught me from the previous slide. Cortisol can either build or it can burn. Okay, it can build or it can burn. Meaning, if we're chronically stressed, so cortisol is a stress hormone. It's an alertness hormone. Most people might have an issue with cortisol because they're not getting enough sleep and they're just chronically stressed. That's when cortisol becomes an issue. All right, that's when when you have that profile, that cortisol is always elevated because you're chronically stressed, and then you start stress eating, that is a recipe for disaster. That's when you get the big beer belly, pot belly. That's an example of it building. Cortisol is actually very good at helping us burn body fat when it's at the levels it should be at. So when we wake up, I went over in lesson 1, cortisol should be spiking. That's what should wake us up. Okay, it's cortisol. It's an alertness hormone. Wake up, get your bearings, see what's going on. If cortisol continues to rise, that's how we get the growth hormone to rise. If cortisol doesn't get to rise for an extended period of time, growth hormone's not going to spike, right? But cortisol and insulin typically have an inverse relationship. So if insulin's high, cortisol is going to be low, right? And this is where the concept and the theory of like a recovery shake comes from, okay, or a recovery meal. What these people kind of thought, and they were right in that regard, is if you drive up insulin, right, cortisol is going to go back down. Cortisol is higher after a workout. Again, it's a stress hormone. Just to give you a little background on that. Luteinizing hormone. Okay, women, you have testosterone as well as men, not in the same quantities. But with fasting, luteinizing hormone actually goes up. So that's another thing for muscle preservation and being able to put on lean mass. Ghrelin, when we fast, that's your main hunger hormone. What happens when we fast, like we're doing in the Panda, continues to go down over time. When you cut calories, follow a traditional North American diet, ghrelin will continue to go up over time because your predominant fuel source is external calories. So those are the things that we're optimizing as far as hormones go. The brain is designed to work this way. It's much more efficient when you're fasted, and it's a very primal thing to fast like this. The way that human beings eat nowadays is completely unnatural. It was in relatively recently to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I talk about that in the book, but it's a relatively recent phenomenon. So feasting or fasting, right? That's part of the Panda. It's a black or white. It's when you fast, you fast. When you eat, you eat. Your body, and that's what I was telling you about Scott Abel, has a tremendous ability to eat. when it's in the right setting without getting fat. So when you eat with this, eat until you're full. Let your appetite dictate that. You're tuning into older parts of the brain. Like, this is the way the body is meant to exert itself, right? And it's meant to fast. Nowadays, people are constantly eating and they don't exert themselves physically enough. So I call it turning on the primal brain. Remember the reframes. This is part of your inner dialogue. This is part of the mind map that we combine with the fasting. Your body fat is a fuel source. It is a food source. That is the main reason, not the only reason, but it's the main reason you have body fat, is a food source. Okay? So if you start feeling those hunger signals, let's say, and it'll happen from time to time, you just got to say that's what fat loss feels like. There's some kind of hormonal thing going on that's saying I'm going to start tapping into this body fat. But body fat is a food source, and food is a drug, right? Think about stress eating. Whoever's done stress eating before, pretty much everybody probably. Food is a drug. If it's a definition of a drug, it is or therefore, to me, it's the most commonly used drug is food. So just be mindful of that, right? Be mindful of that. Okay, so I think I showed you guys the tape, but if you look at, this isn't a document I posted, some of the stuff you can get for the liver cleanse, but this is the 3M tape. You get a pack of 12 for like $12, cheap. What I like to do at night is I take a piece, put it over my mouth, and I sleep like that. Devin still thinks it's funny, almost a year later since I've been doing it, but tell you what, this is the healthiest I've been this year. And I think it's a combination of things. But even if you don't have apnea, if you're breathing through your mouth, and your spouse or partner can tell you if you're snoring or whatnot, that means more than likely you're not getting the oxygen you need when you're sleeping in adequate levels. But just breathing through the nose, I have some stuff. This was a good book that I read last summer, Breath. So when you're not getting the refreshing oxygen we need, okay, I mentioned aldosterone before. That's a hormone that causes you to retain water. So a lot of people will have issues with, I'm going to sleep on time, waking up on time, but I keep waking up to pee all night. I'm not saying with the fasting, just in general. That's a common thing that we'll hear at the gyms. Well, if you're a mouth breather when you sleep, aldosterone is not released the way it should be. Remember, aldosterone is going to signal you to hold water, right? For us, that means not waking up to have to go pee in the middle of the night. It's a good thing when we're sleeping. So a little piece of tape over now, all of a sudden, I can't breathe through my mouth when I'm sleeping, right? So you get a much more cleansing breath. If you see here, humidifies and pressurizes the air when it comes through the nose. That doesn't happen when it goes through the mouth. The mouth should be used to talk and to eat, not to breathe through. NO2, which used to be a very popular supplement. Okay, it's like a dilator for your blood vessels. Only is produced in large quantities when we breathe through the nose, but it's antiviral, antifungal, antiparasitic, antibacterial. Okay, so it's super important. That's why I tell you, as far as the health issue with making sure you're breathing through your nose when you sleep. Now, I've tried a lot of different things, and I don't have apnea or anything, but this little piece of tape, this can be a game changer for you. All right, so before we go over questions, I put up the mind map schedule today. I saw some people already scheduled themselves, and I'll do more than one. Just let everybody have a chance to get a slot first, but you can start scheduling that. Within that document I posted a couple weeks ago, and if you need it, just tell me, I'll send it again. I also had like an eye mask. So a lot of people, if you can't black out your room, you at least want to put like an eye mask on. Like this is, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, something like this. Okay, just goes around your head. And we'll go over the liver stuff next week, right? So order the stuff. It's not, I have an extra, my friend Yvonne had an enema kit she did not use. So I have that if anybody needs it, they don't want to order it. So in 2 weeks, we'll begin that. So next week, I'll give you I'll kind of prep you, give you the liver background, the importance of the liver, why we started doing this within this program. So order the stuff you need. Again, it's not much stuff, but I'll make sure you're very clear on how to do that. Should you choose to do it, you don't have to do it, but it is something that I would recommend to you. So that lesson will be next week. And that is what I have for tonight. So if you have questions, let me stop sharing this. You can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
I have a question.
Yeah, you got a problem.
I'm going to go back to yoga this week. Super hot, super, I'm going to be sweating a ton. Same amount of juice.
You could do more. Like
Okay.
let the that's kind of like appetite, right? Like your body will let you know how much of those nutrients it needs as far as hydration.
Okay.
You'll know, like, man, I need thirsty. Then you got to drink more of it then.
Okay.
That thirst mechanism.
So would you suggest drinking that over just plain water?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
I would, yeah, especially if you're sweating a lot. And it's going to be hot outside this week.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be nice. But so remember that sodium is really how you hydrate, okay? What you got, Jerry?
A detox program I've been through a couple of times, a master cleanse by Stanley Burroughs. People often call it the lemonade diet. They use it for weight loss, but it's really detox. One of the ingredients in that is cayenne pepper. Whenever I've done it, my breathing improves so much that I can breathe
Right.
all the time through my nose. So would it be okay to incorporate some cayenne capsules into this? Would you recommend on days that you eat, or could you use it on days that you're fasting?
I would say you could probably use that on fasting as well. Yeah, that's good. Look into that more.
And the next question would be salt. Again, one of the things with that detox program is that I've done is it's 2 quarts of salt water in the morning to flush your body out. And I've read the book twice now, and I'm still not clear. Why are we taking the salts? Because it's disrupting my my norm, and I'm finding it uncomfortable and kind of a pain. Is it critical? Is it to keep me hydrated? What is? I'm still not clear on why we're taking the salt. I guess the baking soda is to alkalize us more.
Yeah, that'll alkalize you more, and it'll help with kidney function, baking soda. So the sodium, every cell in our body has what's called a sodium potassium pump, okay? As far as energy and metabolism, that's the biggest bulk of your metabolism, or those pumps make up the biggest part of that resting metabolism, right? So most people's metabolism is going to be sluggish when they are not taking an adequate sodium and potassium. Sodium is more important. So the cells are constantly exchanging sodium and potassium. That leads to muscle contraction, right? As far as metabolism and muscle contraction, that's one end of it. Sodium chloride is a precursor to hydrochloric acid, your main digestive enzyme, right? And the reason I have people doing this is most people are deficient in sodium. It also helps break up fecal matter that's stuck to the intestines. So I know what you're going through right now because I went through it for a long time. It does go away. It helps with basically insulin. And there's a book I think I posted, but I'll send you the title of the book too if you want to read all about salt. This one doctor just researches this. But it makes us more insulin sensitive as well. So low sodium can actually lead to insulin resistance. And then feelings of fullness. So if that is an issue you're having with the fasting, a lot of the times you just drink the juice. It's going to hit those satiety centers in the brain, the sodium, that, hey, I got plenty of nutrients coming in. So the way the brain, especially sodium, is critical for everything. Like to me, that's, if you talk about supplements, I know it's not a supplement, but I consider it a supplement. That's the number one thing we should be doing is sodium. So your brain will always seek out nutrients, micronutrients it's not getting, and it'll keep eating until it gets them. That's one cause of overeating, right? Is we're not getting the critical nutrients in. But it's, I always tell people, Jerry, even if they're not fasting, that you want to supplement with that. Now, maybe you got to cut the dose for right now. I would try that first.
I have, and it's gotten better.
Okay.
And tolerate lower doses without a problem, I guess.
Yeah, so start with that. And then what you'll see is over time, you could probably add a little bit, right? So if you're an active guy, if you're active, guys, you want to be taking in between 5 and 8,000 milligrams of sodium a day, which is hard to do if you're just eating, right? Especially now that you guys are only eating predominantly once a day. It's going to be hard to get that in. Jerry, the name of that book is The Salt Fix. Let's see if I have it over here. I'll post it in the group. I'm seeing if I have it in my room over here. But that one, all he does is research. I mean, really, and I think I have it in a later presentation. I go more in depth on that. But it's really fascinating when you look at how in the first, salt's been vilified, but one of the first guys that really turned me on to looking at that was Scott Abel. He was kind of ahead of his time. The one guy who I mentioned at the bottom of those three guys that I put up he was really big into having me get my sodium levels up. And he actually wrote you know what I'll do? We're taking questions because I know you're not on the Facebook group too much, right? I'm going to put a link real quick, guys, in the chat box. You can read this article that Scott wrote, I think in 2008. So you guys click on that link later, you can read that tonight, okay? Give you some background on that. And then I'll do it while we're right here, Jerry, just so I want to make it easier for you. And this is the sodium book. Don't know why it's not coming up here. I got to figure out how to share this, guys. All right, well, I'm doing that. Does that help, Jerry? Does that?
Yes. Yeah, just one other question or comment, I'm done. But I don't know if anyone else has found this. While I'm going through this, if I have something to focus on, I feel like I have boundless energy. But if I don't have something specifically to do, I can't just sit still and like read a book or watch TV or surf the net. I find it very difficult. I need to concentrate while I'm doing this, and if I do, I can get a lot done. I don't know if other people have found that. It's kind of I don't know if that's something you've heard with all your clients, if you've heard that before.
With the fasting, you mean?
I can go to bed, sleep. I can't really relax unless if I'm doing something, I'm fine, and I have great attention and great energy, but I can't just relax while I'm fasting. I start feeling the hunger, to be honest.
Yeah, that's probably, I would imagine from what I've heard from people over time, that'll kind of go away, because you got to think of what those hormones we talked about. If this is relatively new for you guys, they have a powerful effect. Like I've heard people, their energy is great, but they can't sleep the first couple of weeks because everything's being affected. But once you get used to it, I think that you'll notice that won't be an issue. But I'm not too surprised to hear that. Yeah. I was thinking too, Jerry, when I went on after last week's call, when you're talking about your urine was darker, right? Is that still an issue?
Yeah, it is. It is still dark, but I'm drinking more than I normally do. More
You know what
water.
I think that is? Like if you look at what I would guess that is going on after I had time to think about it. So if you look at like diabetes, right? So when diabetes was discovered back a couple thousand years ago, the way that they would kind of diagnose it was the urine was very sweet, like honey. I'm guessing that the reason your urine is darker is it's probably excess sugar that you're peeing out. That would be my guess on it after I had time to think about it. Now, I mean, you can track your blood glucose if you want. There are, I've read of people, I didn't have anybody do this, but they would actually taste their urine to see if it's sweet or whatnot. But I'm thinking that's probably what's going on with you, with the urine.
Okay.
What else we got, guys? All right, if we don't have any other questions, I'll get this up tomorrow. Don't forget to shoot me your check-in stuff each week. Just kind of snap a picture of it and send it to me so I can track, and let me know if anything with the biofeedback stuff, like any of the stuff that the scale isn't measuring, just report that to me. Hey, Kyle, this is going on, or hey, my energy's great, and Anthony's going to be trying a 72. So if anybody's up for starting to try longer ones, just let me know. We'll help you through that. You have the group to support you through that. And you all have my number, so make sure you reach out if you're having any personal questions or any issues, and start scheduling your mind maps too, okay? All right, guys, have a good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.